Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority CAMPA Bill 2015. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. T.S.R. Subramaniam, former Cabinet Secretary. He chaired a committee that reviewed environment laws, and Ms. Neelam Rathore, advocate. Now for the headlines. The CAMPA Bill sets up a legal framework for proper utilization of transparent, unspent money meant for afforestation. New projects seeking to use forest land may be asked to deposit money as compensation. The bill proposes to set up a Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority. The Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority CAMPA Bill 2015 seeks to provide a system at the centre and state levels to ensure speedy use of money realized from diversion of forest land to non-forest purposes. As of now, 38,000 crore rupees is lying unutilized.
I move for leave to introduce bill to provide for the establishment of funds under the public account of India.
By introducing the Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority Bill, government intends to remove the ad hocism existing in implementing the Supreme Court order on afforestation activities. It proposes to establish a National Compensatory Afforestation Fund (CAF) and a state-level CAF to credit amounts collected by state governments from forest land conversions. Government wants to utilize the amount to create productive assets and generate employment opportunities in rural areas, especially in backward tribal areas.
My concern is that not only utilization of that money which has been put in the hands of now these authorities which are created, but that in future it is very clear from the intention of this particular bill that they will be diverting more and more forest areas. When we talk of the climate change and all, and at the same time we are in developmental activities, we will be depleting the forest cover in this country.
The proposed legislation seeks to provide a legal framework at the centre and each state to provide safety, security and transparency in utilization of the money which is currently lying unused in nationalized banks. According to the bill, the promoter of a project in forest land needs to deposit the net present value of the forest land used for non-forest purposes with the government for afforestation. The money will have to be doubled if the promoter uses land in degraded forest. Net present value has been defined as a quantification of the environmental services provided for the forest area diverted for non-forestry uses. The collected money is kept in nationalized banks and is being managed by an ad hoc Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority CAMPA. Once the bill is passed, the money will be transferred to non-lapsable interest-bearing funds under public accounts of the Union and each state.
It's a question of what public purpose is served by diverting the forests. And the fundamental question is that forests themselves are public assets. Yes. So the signal that a bill like this gives is that if you have the money, then the Ministry of Environmental Forests is willing to give away pristine forest lands or forested areas and in exchange for the money then do compensatory afforestation.
Union government has collected more than 38,000 crores from various state governments over the years for compensatory afforestation. Supreme Court in its order in T.N. Godavarman Tirmalpad versus Union of India and others has ordered that the money be transferred to central government due to lack of institutional mechanism at each state for usage of the money. According to the Supreme Court orders, only 10% of the amount occurred with CAMPA is being released to states for the fear of it being misused. States have been demanding the release of more funds from CAMPA.
Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change has appointed a committee in November last year to review all the existing environment legislations in the country. The committee has come up with various recommendations suggesting amendments in the environmental laws. CAMPA bill is one of the first of its legislation by the NDA government in its series of environmental reforms. With camera person Vijay, Rajkamal Rao, Rajya Sabha TV.
At present, an ad hoc National CAMPA and ad hoc State CAMPAs established by government orders receive money collected for compensatory afforestation. Once the national fund is created, money collected by state governments, which has been placed with the existing National CAMPA, will be transferred to the national fund. So that brings us straight into the question, sir. Is there a need for diversion of land in lieu of compensation and then go in for afforestation?
There are two separate things. Your first question is a correct question. Is there a need? There is a need. If you have a road from Delhi to Bombay, here and there it may pass through a forest area, and you may have to divert the extra cost or tunneling will be so much more. So the sensible way would be, all over the world would be, to use minimal forest land for which very stringent conditions need to be attached, and have reforestation elsewhere. There are huge degraded forests. There are 70% forests have come down to 20% forests. So there is enormous room for reforestation. So that is a fundamental question you are asking. We are going, that has been answered. For development where absolutely required forest land.
In public interest?
In public interest.
Only in public interest?
Only in public interest.
But does the bill cover the public interest part?
Well, see, this bill is not meant to decide on afforestation policy. This is purely looking at, when the compensation fund comes, through whatever mechanism, what is the method to accumulate it, what is the method to spend it, earlier the ad hoc committee was non-transparent. We now make it statutory on the orders of the Supreme Court. So we should not look at the policy here. The policy for forestation, afforestation, for industrialization.
So getting in, sir, here, they set up a mechanism to collect compensation also. Define NPV, then they also go into what is environmental services and how the cost is going to be arrived at.
No.
And then they disburse it.
No. Which land can be transferred, cannot be transferred, how much, is a separate policy issue.
It's already there in the Forest Act.
It may change from time to time. It may change from time to time. But this one, what it does is that the money collected under that formula, how to keep it, how to maintain it, how to use it, and to what purposes it can be used. So in other words, this is a utilization mechanism, not a policy mechanism.
Correct. Ma'am, you want to add into that?
Yes. Broadly, if you see, earlier MOF had taken out a notification, and subsequent to the directions of the Supreme Court, they had also formulated certain guidelines. Now, if you see the guidelines and the notification which is sought to be replaced now, broadly the procedure is the same. It's governing body, executive body, how you disburse the funds. But the intention is only to change the control and the management. That is the change. The purpose is to get the control in your hands and then put it in the public accounts.
Isn't that exactly what the Supreme Court wants the government to do?
No, it does not. Supreme Court clearly has, after considering a contention that this is unconstitutional and it is should be treated as a consolidated fund or the public fund under Article 266, the government negated this contention and they said this will be an independent fund and it will not be merged with the consolidated fund. And
so that issue has been addressed by this bill, according to you?
No, that issue, it's a complete turnaround. They say, no, this is part of the consolidated fund. It has to go into the public accounts.
So do you...
So there's a complete...
Do you see a contradiction?
Yes, there's a contradiction, complete contradiction.
There's no confusion here. Earlier, this fund, which was administered through an executive order, had the aura of being part of the governmental funds, coming into the governmental consolidated pool. Now, it is through this statute, this money can now not be transferred for any other purpose except mentioned in this particular bill. In other words, this is the purpose of the court's orders also, as far as I can see it now, that in fact, earlier, all the money got accumulated because Supreme Court said, we don't know where it's coming from, where it's going. Now it's all coming into this pool. How it will be utilized, in what manner, with who. I agree with her to some extent that the management pattern is the same, but the nature of the fund has changed. I have many adverse comments on the management pattern here, which is a different thing. But clearly Supreme Court's objective has been met, that it is now an independent fund when it comes through. And
But the bill says it will be part of under the public accounts. It's clearly mentioned in the bill.
That is, CAG will come in there.
Okay. It is for
This is for audit and examination purposes, for public scrutiny purposes, it will be a public fund. But it is an independent
CAG was already there.
statutory
No, ma'am.
fund.
What,
CAG
sir,
was already there.
Ma'am, what sir is saying is that if it is not under the public accounts, then how will the CAG audit?
No, that is where the confusion is. In terms of the guidelines formulated by the MOEF pursuant to Supreme Court directions, Supreme Court says that double entry system for accounting will be followed, and it will be audited by the controller. And
that is the court's order, but they have to
It's a
include
guideline. It's a guideline in the notification.
It's all been subsumed here.
It's a notification by MOEF which provides for the auditing by the CAG.
Can I make a point?
Yes, sir.
So
please.
there is no change in that.
See, what this, as I see it now here, is from Godavarman, there are about 8 or 9 orders regarding utilization of the compensatory fund.
Correct.
All this has done is to get the essence of all of these, convert them into an act, so that now we don't have to refer to 8 or 9 Supreme Court orders. We can proceed on the basis of this act, and this is now the will of the people. Will of the people has taken into account judicial pronouncements, and this is now legislation which the government enacts. I don't see any contradiction here at all.
Ma'am, the conflicts that you see, can you quickly tell us what are the conflicts that you actually see as far as the court's orders?
It was CAG. When auditing these ad hoc CAMPA account, they observed, which I mentioned earlier also, they observed that this fund should come within the focus of the legislature and the parliament.
Correct.
Okay, and it was CAG's opinion that there should be to bring more transparency. Transparency was always there. See, the Supreme Court, it is incorrect to say that the funds were not utilized. Supreme Court in 2009 said that rupees 1,000 crore will be released every year for the next 5 years. Proportionate to the 10% of the principal of to the account of each state and union territory.
Right.
After 5 years in 2014, Supreme Court has further modified the direction that 10% of that amount and of the principal to each state should be released.
Ma'am,
now,
all that has
CAG
been
was auditing, CAG was auditing, so when we say that CAG to bring in CAG, this bill has been introduced. No, CAG audited that account in 2013 and then it gave its opinion.
Right.
So taking cue from that, they have taken cue from that to bring this bill. Now earlier also a bill was sought to be introduced in 2008.
Could not
pass.
So this is the new version.
This is the new version.
It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the new institutions that the bill seeks to create. Welcome back. The bill seeks to establish a permanent national compensatory afforestation fund under the public account to undertake afforestation activities. The bill proposes to create the National Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, CAMPA, under the central government to maintain funds.
The Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority Bill proposes to create an institutional mechanism for effective usage of funds collected by forest conversions. It proposes to create a National Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority and a similar authority in each state to manage funds. Government wants the authority established under the bill to use money for artificial regeneration, forest management, wildlife protection, and for the protection and conservation activities in protected areas under the Wildlife Protection Law.
Virtually, till the rules are framed, even this act, even if it comes into force, cannot be implemented. The straightforward thing, if I can say, is that the money should have been looking at the real requirement. They should have created an expert body, going into different states, finding out where afforestation is required and allocating that money to these states. That should have been the simple thing.
According to the bill, the National CAMPA will consist of a governing body and an executive committee and a monitoring group. The governing body will be headed by the Union Environment Minister and will be responsible for preparing policy framework for the functioning of the authority. The executive committee will be responsible for the approval of annual plans for state governments and for the CAMPA and formulation and implementation of schemes approved by the governing body. The monitoring group will be responsible for the monitoring and evaluation of works implemented by states and fund utilization.
So you have this elaborate administrative arrangement that will come into being. And the questions very legitimately a lot of local people are asking is, where do we fit in? How do already existing local bodies which are managing forests, which are conserving forests, how do they participate in this whole idea of forest management? Because essentially it boils down to, how do you want to conserve forests? But this, let's be clear, this bill is not so much about managing the forests, but about managing monies after you have diverted those forests to non-forestry purposes, collected money from user agencies.
The Compensatory Afforestation Fund Bill 2015 was introduced in Lok Sabha by the Minister for Environment and Forest and Climate Change, Prakash Javadekar, on May 8, 2015. The bill is an extension to the Forest Conservation Act 1980 that provides basic guidelines for conservation and regulation of indiscriminate diversion of forest land for development needs of a state. It intends to harmonize development with that of conservation of forests and forest ecosystem.
Government is arguing that introduction of a separate legislation of CAMPA is implementing a Supreme Court order. But activists in environment sector demand the government to withdraw the legislation and include all provisions under existing forest conservation acts. This is the first of a kind of legislation where government has introduced separate provisions to spend the money that has been collected from states. With camera person Vijay, Rajkamal Rao, Rajya Sabha TV.
Some sources of funds for the National Fund will be 10% of the funds collected for compensatory afforestation by states each year, grants in aid, other sums received by and loans borrowings taken by the National CAMPA. Now, straight away coming to you, first of all, ma'am, on the issues raised by this, it appears more of utilizing the funds by diverting land creates a highway for that activity, which can be easily, tread upon by the state governments. Do you see a pitfall?
No, this system was in place earlier also. There is no change here. When a authority or a person approaches the government for, they need forest land, they approach the government, and for being allotted that forest land, they have to pay certain amounts, which is called NPV. They have to do compensatory afforestation. This has been the practice ever since the Forest Conservation Act came into being. These are, as Mr. Subramania mentioned, these mitigative measures, they are already in place. These are mitigative measures to minimize the damage which is being caused to the forest land. So there is no change here. The user agency, as we call them, they were already liable for paying these, making these payments and for carrying out compensatory afforestation. That amount was already being taken.
What about the local participation?
Local participation is there. When a forest land is being diverted, there is a...
No, in the management activities.
In the management, which this bill does not address at all.
Yes, sir, please.
I think there is some confusion here. I think, firstly, as she says, they are only formalizing a process which already exists.
Correct.
The problem was, the states did not have a formal mechanism for utilization of the funds. So the diversion of forest takes place here, the utilization is taking place there. There is no pipeline to ensure that somebody looks at it, what kind of projects, what kind of schemes, and do them in a public manner. I think this is what it does. This is a gap Supreme Court itself pointed out here. I thought now we are going to look at, so we now segregate it from the policy of afforestation to how to use the afforestation compensation money elsewhere. In fact, the committee which I chaired has asked for 3 times compensation. That means the money going to be available is now going to be 3 times if the government agrees to it. It's a separate thing, what it was earlier. The comments I have on these are the following. This is much too top-heavy. With the chief ministers, etc. They will meet once in 3 years. It will be highly delegated. No chief minister will have the time to call the meeting, etc. Number 1. Number 2, this is too departmental oriented. Entirely, I see both in Government of India and the state government, it consists only of the forest department officers who are pretty good. But they need some sunshine from outside. Now, the danger is you cannot have too many private interests coming in here. But there are enough NGOs, good NGOs, there are good, sensible experts, etc. Some outside interest should come in, because anything done departmentally will not be too good. The third is, somebody mentioned here, the rules and the schemes, how it will be utilized. Heaven knows, so much of compensatory. Do you know that the quality of forest cover, forest acreage has not gone down? The quality has gone down very badly. It is disastrous. People don't know it. They are publicizing again and again, acreage of forest is remaining. It is remaining, but 70 has become 40% density, 40 has become 20% density, 20 has become... So the amount of coverages has gone is very, very dangerous. So this is the vehicle where you get put more money in and make sure that technology used, and then it goes to the right kind of areas to strengthen the forestry programs, etc., for compensation. So for every acre that is taken here, 5 acres should come, new forest should come.
Delegation of authority. Is it possible in government? If the chief ministers, prime ministers want to delegate?
My worry is, they have not spoken about the mechanism, which hopefully will come in the rules. There they should not make it a ghar ka pocket ka. They should not make it a Bukhari son-in-law program. It should be, that is a worry that I have, is nature of who will prepare the schemes, who will do the approval, all that is not here. That is all in the rules. So I am more concerned, this is okay, as she says, this is nothing but translating existing practice.
Correct.
But the real crux of it is, there I am worried, the rules and schemes. If I were the parliament, I will say, bring the rules first. I want to see it, approve it then, and then get
That is where the transparency comes in.
Yeah.
See, may I add to this?
Yeah.
In the last order of 2014, March 2014, which the bill has completely overlooked for reasons. The Supreme Court has directed MOEF to formulate guidelines, other than the guidelines already formulated, for things for which this money cannot be used.
Exactly.
Okay? That has not been addressed. Supreme Court put a ceiling. They said you have to come out with a ceiling.
All rules.
That only, they say only 50 crores, which is released to for the management, establishment cost, the monitoring and evaluating policies and all. Only ceiling has been put by the Supreme Court of 50 crores. So that ceiling aspect is gone.
One last bit, sir, and you need to really address it well for the understanding of all our viewers. Rules and guidelines. These are the major thrust areas of any bill. Bill is basically gives you the policy umbrella. Correct?
Cover.
Now, but rules and guidelines come much later by the departments themselves. Is there a way to check and balance rules and guidelines?
See, my worry is this, that due to inaction or due to sporadic action or erratic action, purely executive matter like management of the forests has been handed over to the courts, who periodically give orders, a whole mess here. This is correct that you bring a system here for the management. But the key of this system is, as she said, what kinds of programs, what can be done, what cannot be done, the broad guidelines, which may not also be permanent, which can change from time to time. The mechanism, how that is established, etc., is not clear to me. This is too top-heavy, a kind of a board. To expect the Chief Minister or the Prime Minister to spend time on schemes and programs is absurd. That is not transparent here. So in other words, my suspicion is what they have done is, just as a cover, what Supreme Court has said, put it in a different language and close the matter. I want them to have gone one further step.
And applied their mind.
What will happen is, this will go through, something will happen, Supreme Court will come again and say, you have done this wrong and why did you do this? And that is the lack of thinking that has gone into this.
Moving on, sir. My colleague Raj Kamal Rao spoke to Mr. Ashok Chaudhary, convener Forest Workers Association of India, and tried to get his point of view.
Because it's not clear who will be the member of the body, and it will be totally controlled by Forest Department, Environment Department, de facto Forest Department, what we call in the field area Ban Vibhag. It's not Environment Ministry. It's a force called policing the forest area, and the history says that they have been always become a very anti democratic, anti-republican, and they don't believe in Indian constitution, they don't believe in Indian parliamentary regulations or whatever rules. So it's highly unreliable source, and the record says that all projects, be it industrial, any other project, any non-forest area used for non-forest use, the afforestation status has been very bad. You can count on fingers that actual afforestation hasn't happened. And because there's no involvement of credible institutions in this. Forest department is not credible, and today after FRA you must involve tribal ministry, social justice ministry and the Gram Sabha, which is very, very important.
Thank you, sir and ma'am, for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the RSTV page of YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Raj Sabha TV.